Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with 12 operas I just can't live without. This is my purely personal list of incredible music dramatico things that I would never, ever, ever want to have to give up if I had to. And I'm not normally an opera guy. I'm a composer guy. So, if I like the composer and they wrote operas, I'll like their operas. If they only wrote operas and they're a composer and I like their works, I like their operas. That's how I operate. I tend not to follow singers around and stuff like that. So my approach is personal to me for the things that I really love, and I'm sure yours is for you. And so I would really love to see your list of the 12 operas you can't live without. I mean, really think about it. Serious choices have to be made here. And I think this is kind of a fun selection. I mean, for me anyway, it is. So here we go. You ready? Handel, Ariodante. I mean, the rediscovery of Handel operas has been one of the greatest things to happen in the past couple of decades, 4 decades or so. You have all mentioned that in the comments. We were talking about things that are in good shape for the 21st century. Handel opera is definitely one of them. And the opera, it's a tough choice, isn't it? There's so many great ones. I mean, they're wonderful. Giulio Cesare and, Rinaldo and Orlando and Alcina. And I mean, there's just like a ton of really wonderful operas. Circe. But I chose Ariodante. Ariodante is really special. One of the things that people always criticize when it came to Baroque operas is that, it's nothing but a string of endless da capo arias separated by secco recitatives. And that's really, it's true to a point, but it took some really creative staging and everything to show us just how wonderful they are and how Handel, particularly, creates character through his arias. I mean, these are big, long works. And everyone gets a bunch of arias and accompanied recitatives and other numbers to somehow inhabit their roles. And he does it. He does it marvelously. And Ariodante is just one of those things that does that. It does it so well. The characters are really well drawn and the music is stunning. The arias are fabulous. And it doesn't do it doesn't do the usual thing all the time. For example, at the end of Act 2, as Handel originally wrote it, Ginevra, who is the betrothed of Ariodante, and they have, all these complications because, Lurcanio or whatever his name is. Well, here's the opera. So what's his name? Polonesso, Lurcanio, that's it. Is like out to get her also, and he's like a jerk, and he has to get killed at the end. And okay, the bottom line is there's this dream sequence. It's a dream sequence. You're in good shape when you have a dream sequence. And Ginevra has these nightmares. And so instead of ending with the typical da capo aria exit, end of act, there's a ballet. And it was danced by Marie Salé, I think her name was, her ballet troupe was bopping around London at the time. And she was considered too licentious. And she had to go back to France where all those, immoral people are. But there's this nightmare dream sequence. And Ginevra wakes up and she says, I get no rest even in sleep in a recitative. And that's the end of the second act. No aria. It's totally unconventional. So, of course, Handel had to take it out and revise it and make it more conventional. But the point is that when you have an art form that relies on the repetition of a few simple structural forms like da capo arias, any variant, any change, a chorus, an arietta, which is a da capo aria without the da capo, it's just an A section, a short aria. Anything that's different like that makes a huge difference in terms of the overall structure of an act or, the work as a whole. And so when you listen to these things, you listen to the ways in which they vary and in which Handel, fiddles with the basic formula. And he was a genius and the operas are fabulous. So my first is Ariodante. Has a happy ending. It's just wonderful. This is the usual mistaken identity and all that crap, but the music is stunning. Next, Carmen, Bizet's Carmen. Well, because it's Carmen. I mean, it's got the best tunes in the world and more of them than anyone else ever dreamed of. It's just such an incredible piece that way. And it's a great story. And I had so much fun playing it. I played percussion at the pit. And, we had a really, I've told this story, but we had a really obnoxious Carmen. And I was playing I played bass drum and cymbals, but I also played the castanets, machine castanets, because she wasn't a castanetist. So she's going la, 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 la. And I was going clickety, 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 clacking. And she was giving me all of this grief. She pulled me aside. And first of all, this was at Symphony Space in New York, up on like 97th Street and Broadway. This was not the Metropolitan Opera House. This was a community version with a community Carmen. I mean, Carmen is sort of a proletarian kind of gal, but this was one of those, I'm sure you've seen them if you've been in the business at all, one of these sort of over-the-hill, voice coachy kind of singers who was this was her opportunity to do this major role. And she was, never had a career, never will have a career. I don't know what she did. There's a stenographer in normal life, who knows? And she was determined to be Carmen and behave like Carmen. It was ridiculous. And so she was giving me all this grief about, make sure you follow me, and if I don't do this and I do that. And I said to her, finally, I just said to her, on the night, I said, you are at my mercy, because I will either will or will not do what you are clacking around up there. And the person who's going to look like the fool is not going to be me, because nobody will see me. And she just stopped. And that was the last grief I got. That all went off beautifully, but she was awful. But the opera's fabulous, and playing it was just such a thrill. Next, Aida. Aida was the first opera I ever saw. The old Met production. Who was it with John McCracken and Leontine Price and with the ballet that was the fight between the Egyptian and the Ethiopian, where they had the little corps de ballet boxers going like this, it was, it was wonderful. It absolutely blew me away. I was just thrilled beyond belief, and I still am. It's still one of the greatest pieces of orchestration ever conceived for the stage, and terribly underrated. Terribly underrated. In fact, I was reading this. We're going to be talking about it soon. This book, Carol Berger, doing Mahler's Symphonic World. Interesting book, actually. Music for the Age of Uncertainty. If only he could have left out that little piece of bullshit. But anyway, I'm reading this book, and of course he's talking about Mahler's models for things. And as usual with all these people, they completely ignore the music that Mahler actually conducted, which was Italian opera for the most part, and he loved Aida. Mahler was fascinated by Aida, particularly the death scene and the opening of the third act, which is string harmonics, and everyone's doing the note A or whatever it is. It's where Mahler sort of got the opening of his first symphony from, and he's talking about, well, it's this, it's Wagner, it's that. It's not. It's Verdi. I mean, it's very interesting. The more you know Verdi, and the more you know your Verdi, the more interesting Mahler sounds too. But I've only my respect for Verdi has only increased over the years, because he's just so full of solid musical value, wonderful tunes, fabulous timing, dramatic timing. It's just marvelous. So Aida, definitely. Rossini, La Cenerentola, Cinderella. It's an Enlightenment version of Cinderella. There really isn't any magic stuff in it, not much. And the characters are so marvelously well drawn. I mean, they're just so much fun. The two evil stepsisters and her goofy stepdad, or he's a real father, actually, and her goofy father, and Cinderella herself, who is just such a wonderfully melancholy character who gets that fabulous rondo at the end to sing, which is like, wow, amazing. And the prince and Dandini, his sidekick. I just love it. It's such wonderful, wonderful music, and so much fun. And the story is touching. It's genuinely touching. I mean, it really has human interest, even though it's a fairy tale, and even though it's a comedy, and all of those things. There's something really, really deeply felt about the whole thing, and it's done with such a light touch. It's beautiful. So after that, Mozart. Well, Marriage Figaro. That was another one of the first operas I ever saw when I was in high school. The Countess was Evelyn Lear. Justino Diaz was in it too. I think he was Figaro, right? And a few other people. These are all at the Met. We had like a student subscription, and they would bus us in from Connecticut, and we would, run amok through New York until lunchtime. And then, because it was a private school, they had no responsibility. You signed a waiver, and then if you never came back, that wasn't their problem. So we had a great time. And it was, oh God, I love that opera too. It was so elegant, so beautiful, so full of heartfelt melody. I mean, you just watch these things, and in those days, remember, they didn't have subtitles or any of that stuff. You could buy the libretto, and you could sit there with your little flashlight or like sort of angle it if the stage was brightly lit and see what they were singing about. But gosh, it was really pretty obvious. It was so beautiful. So The Marriage of Figaro was number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, number 6. Tosca. Oh gosh, now Tosca. How did I first encounter Tosca? I remember now. This was very, very funny. When I was a kid, I was cutting lawns, to make some extra money. And I would take all the money I made or any money I got from anywhere else, my birthday or my allowance, and spend it on records. And I took my bicycle down to the downtown Milford. And most of the stuff that I got in downtown Milford was in Goodwill. But for some reason, Goodwill Industries had this huge record collection there. It was next to the fire station on New Haven Avenue. But there was like a shopping mall that had really cheap 5 and dime places like Kresge's and Grant's and things like that. And I had to get something like socks. I don't know what it was. So I went into this place, and they had a record section. And the record section was always, K-Tel and the cheapest pop, and rock stuff. And I'm looking at this record section because I always looked at record sections. And there was this chunk that was obviously not a pop thing. It was like thick. And it was the Colin Davis Caballé Carreras Tosca on Phillips. What it was doing there, I have no idea. I think it must have been a cutout because it had like an oil stain. There was something defective about the box in the lower right-hand corner. So it was there, and it was sort of like, I don't know, been discarded somehow. I don't know what its story was, but the records were fine. Everything, it was just the plastic that was like smeary, smudgy. So I bought it because it was like $3 or $2, and I'd never seen Phillips packaging before. It was way beyond my price range. I didn't even know what Phillips was. I must have been about like 10, 11, somewhere in there. And it was this beautiful box with the styrofoam inside and the padded things, beautifully pressed records. It was a level of elegance. I didn't even care what the opera was. It could have been Penderecki's The Devils of Loudun. That was on Phillips too. But nope, it was that Tosca. And wow, did that blow me away. Holy mackerel. It's a great performance. First of all, it was beautifully recorded with the Covent Garden Forces under Colin Davis. Really, really spectacular sound and wonderful singing. And it's a good story. People tend to poo-poo it, because it's so melodramatic. Yeah, great, fabulous. You go away humming everything, and it's just, and it's fast. It doesn't linger ridiculously. And the parts that do build up, like the Te Deum at the end of Act 1, they're really, really well planned. You really begin to appreciate. I like operas that have pacing, where the composer really knows how to time things. Because my next example is just the opposite of that. Strauss, Richard Strauss. Richard Strauss's operas are all, the singing starts where the opera ends. The plot's over, and so let's all have a sing for the next 20 minutes. And Strauss was amazing for an opera composer because he had almost no sense of timing at all. He fooled us because Salome has timing. Salome is like perfectly proportioned. Electra, they are already making cuts, even though it's less than 2 hours long. And my pick from Strauss is Die Frau and Schatten, which has lots of things you could chop out, tons, but I like it complete. I like every excessive note. It is the poster child for opulent excess on the operatic stage. It has a plot that means nothing and makes no sense whatsoever, an orchestration of unimaginable size and complexity for no discernible purpose, other than to simply bewitch us, which it does. And it's just the most glorious hog wallow of a piece. Oh my God, it's beautiful. And it has the typical Strauss ending where the plot ends, the prince gets depetrified, what's her name gets her shadow, and then they all stand there while the unborn children are running around going, "Ma, ma, 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 what are you doing?" Oh, it's just ridiculous. And I love it. I love every second of it. And after 3.5 hours, it still ends quietly. I mean, what was Strauss thinking? I have no idea. But it's just an incredible work, and it's his greatest opera, and maybe his greatest work in any form. Just for how wonderfully it is uniquely him and no one else. I mean, they just get away with it. He didn't even think he got away with it. I think he was a little disappointed in the result, according to his correspondence. But I don't, what did he know? I mean, he was only the composer. So next, Poulenc, Dialogues of the Carmelites. Oh, this is so beautiful. Not only is it beautiful, it's one of the most exquisite marriages of text and music, because Poulenc was incredibly meticulous in his setting of words. And he wanted it to be sung, this opera, in the language of wherever it was being performed. And so you would think that because he was so meticulous about it, it has to be done in French, because his setting of the original French libretto is just magnificent. I mean, you're not usually conscious of that in an opera, and if anything, you don't want to be conscious of it. But here, there's something about the way the words and the music go together that is so perfectly done. And the story is so unconventional. It's about a convent of nuns during the French Revolution who get eventually sentenced to death by guillotine, and they all go to the chopping block one after the other, singing the Salve Regina. It's just gut-wrenching and beautiful. But even when it's done in English, as I've only seen it done in English, I've seen the Met production maybe 20 times at this point. It just works. It works fabulously well. And it's a bunch of short scenes linked by some common motives. And it's heartbreaking and gorgeous at the same time. And it's always fun to watch people who send their friends there who are nuns, because they just don't know what's going to happen to those nuns in the opera. They think, oh, we know, Sister Leonarda, let's send her to Dialogues of the Carmelites because it's about nuns. Well, it is. But what happens to those nuns is another story. As I've said before, and I've talked about this before, I mean, I went with friends of mine, and there were a bunch of nuns there. There always are. And one of them was so overcome that her fellow sisters were literally carrying her out when it was over. I mean, I'm not laughing because it was a mockery. It was stunning. It was shocking. It really was, and it's a seriously gripping evening of theater. Absolutely wonderful. And so that's definitely one of the great operas. And you'll notice that a lot of these things from here on, the rest of these are 20th century works. Because I think 20th century opera is just fabulous, at least the first half of the 20th century. The second half, well, we still aren't sure what's coming down the pike. After Poulenc, Britten, The Turn of the Screw. Fabulous because it, is the linchpin of a new form, effectively, chamber opera. And because it is such a great story. It's a ghost story. It's Henry James. And Britten's setting, which is a series of short scenes interspersed with literal theme and variations, numbered variations on the opening theme, which is a 12-note theme, but it doesn't matter. It's a wonderful theme. It's very, very singable. Da 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 da. See, I can do the whole thing. It's an incredibly gripping piece. Really phenomenal in 2 short acts. And I've seen it maybe every place that does it, I try and see it. I've seen it over a dozen times now, and it always works. I think it's Britten's greatest opera on the whole. I really do. I think it's more powerful than Peter Grimes, and musically, it's one of his greatest works too. It's a work of real genius in the way he handles his musical materials. And the ghosts, the ghosts, fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Janáček, you gotta have a Janáček, don't you? The Cunning Little Vixen. Now, Janáček is a toughie because his last 5 famous operas. There's Yennefer, then there's Cachacabanova and the Cunning Little Vixen in the Macropolis case, and From the House of the Dead. And Bruchek is great too, but nobody pays attention to it because it's a comedy. But and Fate is kind of bizarre, but it's also got wonderful music. But they're all wonderful. And Yennefer is very hard to leave off my list because I think the second act of Yennefer, particularly the Kostelnichka's solo scene, is just the most heart-wrenching and gripping piece of music anybody ever wrote for 5 minutes. But I choose the Cunning Little Vixen because it's like nothing else. It's based on a comic strip. All the characters are animals. It's a fairy tale in its way. It's certainly not for children. In Act 3, our heroine, the Vixen, gets shot and turned into a muff. So it's a very unsentimental view of old age, of the cycle of life. It's extraordinary, and it's full of this nature-intoxicated, rapturous music, all based on Czech speech rhythms and folk songs, and it's incredible. And it's fast. And it's all over with in about 2 hours, a little less, really. Wow, what a piece of music. The old New York City opera production with the sets by Maurice Sendak was just so marvelous. It was fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. And I saw that about 150 times, too. I couldn't get enough of it. I really couldn't, and I still can't. It still is a piece that just places you in another universe while it's happening. And you can listen to the whole thing in Czech without even having to pay attention to the words. I mean, it's just a continuous flow of glorious music. So it's like, wow. You want to pay attention to it? Good. You don't want to pay attention to the words? Don't. Just listen. It's amazing. Number 11, Porgy and Bess. Now, I know some of you are going to say, he's just saying that because he's American and he's got to throw an American thing in it. Actually, no. The Britten is there because I have to put something British in it. Porgy and Bess is there because it is the great American opera, and I'm proudly American, and I'm proud of Gershwin because I think he's an underrated genius, and Porgy and Bess is an underrated opera. It is a through-composed, even though it has songs that became popular, but it's a through-composed, fully operatic opera. It's over 3 hours long, basically, or around 3 hours long. Tons and tons of music. It's in an idiom that is as personal and powerful and expressively potent as any composer yet invented. And I'm not exaggerating this. I'm really not. And it's a very human and beautiful story about a community and about love, and it just seems to me so real, so believable in the way that it functions, and it has an equivocal ending. I mean, it doesn't gild the lily anywhere. It's not like most operas, which are just dopey and ridiculous. And you ignore that, of course, because if the music is great and the characters are great, and we don't care what happens or what the story is, do we? But this is one of those pieces where it just seems like it was a statement, a really powerful and important statement. And it's Gershwin's greatest work, and it is the great American opera. I mean, still. And we couldn't have chosen a better one because it's a masterpiece. And I just love listening to it, too. It's another one of those operas where you could just put it on and listen to it. And there's tons of it that you won't have heard. Beyond the regular normal songs like Summertime and I Got Plenty of Nothing and that sort of Bess, You Is My Woman Now and that stuff. And it's fabulous music. I mean, the whole hurricane scene and it's marvelous. But last but not least, this might be an unusual choice for some of you, but it's a work that has grown on me over the years. And now I just can't get it out of my head. Stravinsky's Oedipus Rex. Now, it's kind of an opera, right? It's an operatorio. Stravinsky billed it as an opera oratorio. It's a hybrid, mixed genre piece, but it is an opera. It's supposed to be staged. And what fascinates me about Oedipus Rex is that, first of all, you're not supposed to understand the words because it's in Latin. You're just supposed to listen to it. And second of all, the characters actually don't move. They're not supposed to actually do anything. They're like statues doing their thing. And it speaks entirely through the music. And the music is completely eclectic. It encompasses every possible idiom, from folk music to Mozart to Verdi. To, what Stravinsky is doing is taking this eclectic musical hodgepodge and telling this story in a way which, while sometimes the music fits what is happening on stage and what the words are saying, sometimes it's completely antithetical to it. It's in a style that's utterly alien to what we know is happening on stage. And it's the tension between the music and the actual story, which everybody knows, that creates such an amazingly powerful statement. It's an extraordinary work, really amazing. Stravinsky referred to it as a garbage dump because he piled so many different musical idioms into it, all in about, 45, 50 minutes. That's all. And I don't know. There's something unbelievably compelling about it. And what makes it so interesting for me, one of the things, also is that there's all this talk today about Regie Theater, this director's theater where they take a nice normal story that takes place someplace, like a regular story, and they stick it in a, like the Chiro ring. You get hookers in a hydroelectric plant hauling, dead bodies around, or I don't know whether the Valkyries were doing that. They rewrite it all. They do things that are so opposed to what the composer's plain intentions were and to what is actually audibly happening in the music. But here's a work where it's the music that does it. It's Regie Theater. The composer is the regie, and he's taking this story and he's examining it from every angle and subjecting it to every possible context. It's just a work of unbelievable genius and endless fascination. And I collect recordings of it, and I listened to like dozens of them. Once I had a Stravinsky Oedipus Rex fest, and it was like, it's very difficult to pull off, I think, correctly. I mean, there's that insane duet between Jocasta and Oedipus, where it's just flying along after Jocasta's Da Capo aria. It's Baroque, and then she does her oracula, 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 that stuff. And oh my God, it's just phenomenal. And then the two of them go off in this sort of Verdi-like duet at cabaletta sort of thing, in like a lickety-split tempo, where they're going, coffee, 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 don't beware the oracles, don't listen to the oracles, you stupid jerk, up. And he's screaming back at her, going like, what are you worried about, Jocasta? Oh, Jocasta, Jocasta. And the words are just like tumbling out. Oh, gosh, it's phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. And so that, my friends, are the 12 operas that I absolutely can't live without, and the reasons why I cannot live without them. I'm very interested to see your selections. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me, and take care.